in the US. I didn't even know I was carrying this stress about health. If anything goes wrong, if your child falls out of a tree and breaks their arm, it could bankrupt you. And I think all of those things, when I first arrived, I was just feeling extraordinarily relieved. I would say that I definitely had the honeymoon phase. And I think that first impression was so powerful and stuck with me so much, this well-being of my family in particular, that I didn't notice over time that I had become quite isolated, quite socially isolated. I would say you can't create belonging for internationals if you're not thinking about belonging for all of us.
Yeah.
So every person has a need for belonging. Every person has a right to belonging. And if we are to belong as internationals, we need to belong to the same community as Danes. It has to be an us, not an us and them.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Decoding Diaspora Podcast, a podcast in which we talk about the aspirations and everyday challenges of migrants, expats, internationals, and the diaspora, and how they find the resilience to overcome them. Well, if you have moved to another country, then as a migrant or as an international, you would know that the initial days or years are never straightforward. They are not that easy. How do you find connection in your surroundings? How do you feel at home? Do you ever get to feel at home? Even when you find work and begin to find a network, does that change anything for you? Or do you continue to be in the periphery of society? Well, all of this ultimately leads to the question of belonging. I know we have talked about belonging previously on this podcast, but really this is a topic that demands more attention. In late May, in the city of Copenhagen, there was a wonderful event called Building Belonging, which saw a fantastic turnout of both Danes and internationals, all because they were collectively interested in how do we create belonging for us all. And the force behind this event was a lady called Elisabeth McClure, who also is the guest on our podcast today. Elisabeth McClure is the founder and CEO of Nabo, an organization working from the bottom up to create exactly that: connection and belonging. Elisabeth has originally a researcher background. She has worked on development psychology in the intersection of public policy. Well, today I have the good fortune of being in conversation with Elisabeth and dig deeper into what her understanding of belonging is and what Nabo, her organization, is trying to achieve. Let's get started. Welcome, Elisabeth.
Thank you, Surabhi. Thank you for having me on here today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Indeed. Elisabeth, let's get cracking straight on about this very oft used word and variously interpreted word, but a rather important expression: belonging. What does belonging mean to you?
That's a really good question, because I think when people use the word belonging, there's sort of this sense that it's this sort of cloudy thing in the air. You don't quite know exactly what it is. And I think part of that is because it's subjective. It's a feeling that you have, and every person's sense of belonging will be different. What allows them to feel that will be different. I think when you ask a lot of different people about their sense of belonging, they'll often use words that I myself would use, that it has something to do with being seen and heard, being welcome and wanted, being invited to participate and contribute in meaningful ways, and a general sense of being part of something. Those are all things that I too would say. So it's interesting when I talk to, for example, researchers and people who work in the field of belonging, those are the same words that come up for a lot of people. So maybe that for some people comes from being around a lot of other people and having a lot of relationships and friendships. Maybe for someone else, it's very different. A lot of people can get that kind of feeling from things that aren't as social. So I think the sort of levers that get you that sense can be different, but most people will say that it's essentially about being recognized for who you are and cherished for who you are, as opposed to trying to fit in to someone else's expectations for your acceptance.
Yeah, very well said. I really like how you put it, that it's about being who you are and having the possibility to just be who you are and being accepted for that. Yeah, Elisabeth, to give a context for our audiences, where are you originally from and what brought you to Denmark?
So I'm American and I was raised in Texas, in central Texas near Austin. So very dry, very hot, everything stings and bites there. And then as an adult, I moved to the Washington, D.C. area for about nine years for my undergraduate and graduate degrees. And then I also lived in Illinois and then in New York City for 1 year when I was working for Sesame Workshop.
Right. And then how did Denmark happen in all this movement?
It felt really random, to be honest. I didn't know anything at all about Denmark. In fact, when I first started thinking about moving to Denmark, I did have to look it up on a map. I knew it was somewhere in the Nordics, but I was not familiar enough with the different countries to know which one was which. I definitely didn't know that Denmark was an island nation. That was something really interesting to find out. But how did it come about? I had just finished a postdoc at Sesame Workshop and I was looking for a job. And one of my colleagues there pointed out that there was an opening at the Lego Foundation and the fit was absolutely perfect with what I study. And I started to research Denmark and see the kinds of cultural values and policies that they have in Denmark. And for me, as someone who is studying developmental psychology, so this is how young children grow and thrive with their families, and then thinking about how public policies influence that developmental environment. In the United States, I was sort of clawing my way to policymakers and trying so hard to make changes that benefit families, but having such a hard time. The policies are very different from the United States. When I started to see the way that Denmark's policies, how family friendly they are, it kind of opened up my eyes to what it can look like for a society to really embrace families in that way. When the cultural values and the policymakers are all on board with the same ideas. Yeah. So it was kind of a dream come true in a way. It was like moving to a utopia of what I had been working toward for so long. And of course, Lego is just a really fun place to work. I'm in the middle of nowhere in Denmark, in Jutland. So it's sort of an interesting place to move to if you don't know anything about Denmark. It wasn't Copenhagen. It's like the middle of farmland, sort of Lego town. So it's been a fun place to have young kids. I can say that.
Yeah. And people often say it has been fun, but let's get down to how fun it was for you. How have been all these years been, and how was it initially for you coming and landing from Texas, which seems a little more vibrant than Billund, where you found yourself relatively not as big, a small town, not as big as Copenhagen. How was relocating like, and what were the initial years like?
It's funny, when I first moved here, I had this idea that I would only stay in Billund for a short time, and then we'd move somewhere a little bigger, like Vejle or Kolding or Aarhus. A lot of people do. Yeah. And we had actually spent the time just before coming here in New York City with our young child. And so everything is accessible by subway and there's these incredible facilities for kids. So moving to Billund was a little intimidating on that front, but it didn't take very long after we arrived for me to realize how much I love this kind of small town life in Billund. It's very different from small towns where I come from. In Billund, people walk and ride their bikes everywhere, right? It's kind of like in Copenhagen, but of course, the traffic is just so much less. So there's also a sense, not only can you get anywhere by foot or by bike, but also there's a slow pace and low stress. And you see kids riding their bikes by themselves to school or walking through the woods. Those were all things that were really novel to me as someone coming from a place where safety is not secure, right? Like I spent a lot of time feeling quite stressed about my own safety, and you keep your children close to you because you don't feel safe, right? So seeing that massive, it's a bit hard to describe, but it's a little bit like the sense of your radius for how far you can move away from your belongings, how far you can move away from your children. It just grew exponentially. Yeah. And with that came this enormous sense of relief and freedom to sort of lay down the burden of always having to be keeping my eye on all the things that are precious to me. Yeah. And I think that also is true when it comes to healthcare. Yeah. In the US, I think I didn't even know I was carrying this stress about health. If anything goes right, if your child falls out of a tree and breaks their arm, it could bankrupt you. So you don't want them to play in those ways. Yeah. And I think all of those things, when I first arrived, I was just feeling extraordinarily relieved, a bit of guilt because I got to have this and people that I know back in the US don't, a bit of grief about that. So I would say that I definitely had the honeymoon phase that a lot of people talk about when some people come to a new country. And I think that first impression was so powerful and stuck with me so much, this well-being of my family in particular, that I didn't notice over time that I had become quite isolated, quite socially isolated. You know, when you move to a new country, you leave behind your family, you leave behind maybe the friendships that you had built for years and years, maybe since you were a child, depending on your situation. And I think there's a kind of social unsaid rule that you need to know someone well for at least a few years to have the kind of intimacy that you need to draw on when you need support. Yeah. So if something goes wrong, if you're in the hospital or you have a stomach bug or whatever it is, you don't feel comfortable, you know, randomly calling your colleague. You don't want them to see you in that situation necessarily. Or there's sort of this pressure that you always need to be performing, that you've got it all together, particularly when you're in a professional environment.
Yeah. So did anything happen in particular in your experience to go from the honeymoon phase to the realization that, hey, I'm actually feeling somewhat isolated? And when you talk about having that honeymoon period, I could totally relate to it because I came from the hustle and bustle and the enormous access of a big city like New Delhi, and I landed up in the countryside of Roskilde. And I absolutely cherished the stark contrast. Right?
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So, you know, it's not always an unpleasant shock, but it was a great relief that there can be Zen places where everything is quiet and stable and secure, and the safety of it, of course, as a woman from New Delhi, it meant a lot. But when does the shift from the honeymoon period end and how?
Yeah, for me, it was not noticeable. It was, in fact, in a lot of ways, I still feel all of those things. I still feel overwhelming gratitude to get to live here. And I still feel an overwhelming sense of relief. And when I go back to the US and I feel that tension rise again once I'm there, it just is, again, just a reinforcement to me of how lucky I am to get to live in Denmark. So I think because, like I said, because that feeling is so strong, I wasn't necessarily paying attention to the fact that I didn't have my community with me. I was just, you know, in a lot of ways, I can still tap into this high of like, I get to live in Denmark.
Yeah.
And it makes it hard in some ways for me to remember I need to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And make sure I neglected building the kinds of intimate relationships with other people, the community support that I would need if anything went wrong. And because of that, even if nothing did go wrong, there was this growing tension in the background of there being nothing between me and kind of falling off the edge if something went wrong. It's just me. I have to be strong all the time because there's nobody else I can turn to.
And that must have been rather unsettling, perhaps even scary.
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, because I had such positivity about Denmark, I didn't even necessarily realize what was happening, that the tension and stress were building. And so the fact that I didn't acknowledge it meant that I had this tension inside between the way that I thought about my life, the narrative that I had, maybe even how other people saw me, because I'm relatively social. I had a good job. I was doing well in my work, learning Danish. All these things look like they're going great. So how can I also feel this growing sense that it's all on me? I have to be 100% strong all the time. I almost felt guilty about even acknowledging to myself that was the case, that it was stressful in that way. And so I think ignoring it built up over time. And then I think it probably came to a head to the point where I actually couldn't ignore it anymore when COVID hit. So again, I had this like positive attitude, like we got this, we're going to be fine. We're going to make the best of it and go on lots of forest walks and all of these things. And yet inside it was like this magnification of what I was already experiencing, which is isolation and uncertainty.
Exactly. And had you had a sense of community, you would have been able to offload some of this, carrying the load of many aspects of your life. Is that what you are driving at?
I think there are a couple of things there. One is simply knowing in the background of my mind that should something go wrong, I have people to call. So that's almost like a subconscious thing. Then there's the more practical side, which is that I had very young kids, one of whom was a baby during COVID, and the other was still in kindergarten. And, when you're working full time, and as soon as you are done with work, you've got kids who need you. And in that case, even while you're doing your work, your kids need you.
Yeah.
You have no break on the weekend. It's just 24/7 all day, every single day that you have to be in some way of service to other people. And my children can't take care of me, right? So I think the starkness of that became more clear during COVID. And I was feeling the stress and didn't quite know why. And so I, like many people, started to talk to a therapist online during that time. And I remember this moment, and this was the big light bulb moment. She said, "It sounds like you give a lot of energy to taking care of other people, and that you feel a lot of pressure because you have people that are your responsibility. What do you do to bring you energy? What brings you energy?" And I remember, it's like such a simple question, but I was completely speechless. I mean, it was like you could hear a pin drop, and I realized that I didn't even know what would bring me energy anymore. That at that point, it had been, 5 years since I'd been in an environment where someone else could take on some of these things, and I could do something that was just for me.
Yeah.
Like, what do I even like to do? I don't know.
Seems like, we are so caught up in the joy, the euphoria, and the gratitude of a new setting that it did come at a price. It did come at a cost, which we did not acknowledge or take stock of till it was a little too late.
Right.
Now, let's cut to the current day scenario where you have felt compelled to create a community, a platform that brings in together both Danes and internationals with the aim of building belonging.
Yes.
A, did you struggle with having belonging yourself? And B, what transpired that you felt the need to create this platform?
Yeah, I think I had that sense of isolation or lack of community, with both in the sense of this like kind of background sense of comfort, but also the logistical and practical support that would give me the chance to rest. And I think when I was at work, I started to look to my workplace as where maybe I could find that. I wanted to try to make more human connections in my workplace. And I think that this is a narrative that I hear come up over and over again, is that people think that like, if I have a good job and good colleagues, and if I'm learning Danish and all these things, then I'll belong. And you even hear that from the outside too. Yeah. Like, you'll integrate once you learn Danish and get a job. I had both of those things. So I took that narrative and was like, oh, well, then I just need to really double down on learning Danish. And I need to try to make more connections with my colleagues. But as many people also discover, it's not so easy to make good friends with your colleagues in Denmark. It's a different culture in the US than it is in Denmark.
Right.
Right. And I think also among my international colleagues, many of us, and maybe this is part of being in Billund, a kind of company town, you go to work, you do your work, and then you go home. You go back into your house. And so there isn't that sense of like a neighborhood community that you come home to. It's you come home into the walls of your house, and then the next day you go to work again. So I wasn't finding that sense of belonging in my workplace. And I started to notice the people around me were not finding it either. And that there was a common sort of a common movement downhill, especially among the internationals. And I think especially after COVID, I was not the only one experiencing this. I was not the only one for whom COVID had really made this kind of stark appearance of like, you are alone.
And COVID exacerbated this sense of isolation for everybody.
Yeah.
And what I'm gathering from you is that you went to work and then you went back home and then you lacked a sense of belonging to something greater than that.
Yep.
Or being able to relate to someone over something else. One might be tempted to ask, hey, did you consider joining some associations to build friendships? I mean, it's a common knowledge and it's commonly talked about thing that, it's hard to make friends as grown-ups, and it's also hard to make friends if you're in Denmark. It's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
Did you experience something along those lines? Were there any other dimensions that were bottlenecks?
I'm going to give you an answer that I think a lot of people will give. I didn't have time.
You didn't have time? Yeah, fair enough.
I went to work. Yeah. And then as soon as I was done with work, I had kids at home waiting for me. Yeah. And then once you get home and then you get the dinner and then it's bedtime and you put them to bed and then you're exhausted. It's already 8 p.m.
Yeah. When do you
need to start getting ready? Right. So, and weekends the same. It's the only time I have with my kids. I can't say, oh, sorry, I'm going to go away again. Right. But when you don't prioritize those sorts of things, it does build up. You're not investing in community building for your health. And you can do that for some amount of time.
Yeah.
And I did, and it didn't last. And what I think one of the things that felt intimidating was this sort of unsaid social rule that you need to build up relationships for a long time before you can really benefit from kind of community support that I was looking for. And that's one of the big aha moments that led to Nabo is I realized that many of us are sort of acting like we live next door to each other or somewhere in the same town or even in the same country because Denmark is not that big, but we're not behaving like neighbors in the kind of neighborhood that I imagine and that many people I talk to who come from other cultures, they say that maybe they grew up in. You have a kind of unsaid reliance on the people around you.
Yeah.
The close-knit neighborhoods that some of us have experienced in our past are ones where, you do the proverbial, you go ask for a cup of sugar, but it's more than that too. It's, if someone gets sick or a person breaks their leg or whatever, the neighbors bring food over and maybe help you clean the house and those kinds of things. You're sort of actively looking out for each other. What might this other person need?
Yeah.
And you know that at some point, if it happens to you, you'll be taken care of too.
Yeah.
And so I kind of envisioned this social experiment where we suspend this social rule about how many years you have to, I'm going to use financial language, how many years you have to invest into a relationship before you can draw upon the returns. And then when you do, it's taxed because you can't do it too often.
Right.
We think about relationships and talk about relationships and love and care as transactional, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, what if we just say no to the transactional part? And when I find other people who are looking for that kind of neighborhood and want to actively neighbor one another, how about we just say, I'm going to do that for you and you're going to do that for me. And what's your phone number? I'm putting it in my contacts. And when you get sick, when you break your leg, I'm going to bring you soup.
That's fascinating. Did you really, you sound very optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know if it has been a model anywhere in the world? Perhaps it has. Do you truly believe that you can take from a relation where you don't know each other very well?
I believe that love does not function like a depletable resource. And I also believe that there is a way of building regenerative communities and relationships that don't deplete those resources. So when, in the same way with ecology, with, the global climate issues that we're facing, when you approach nature with this transactional mindset, what you often are thinking about is how do I draw and draw and draw on this resource to get everything that I want until it is fully depleted. And it's not a healthy way to exist. We do the same things when we bring that mindset to our relationships and our communities, when you're thinking in terms of investment and transactional approaches. But at their heart, just like nature, relationships can be regenerative. When you're in a mutual aid community, which is what a really strong neighborhood is, you're giving and receiving in a really healthy way. So you're giving as much as you can when you can, but you also are receiving. And I think that that's actually funny enough. When you go into that kind of mindset, people suddenly feel a lot of shame around receiving in a way that they don't when they're consuming. When you consume, you just want to gobble, 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 gobble. But when you're in this more relational approach, receiving feels like you've failed. And that's a cultural issue that all of us have to work through if we want to have those kinds of communities and relationships. You give as much as you can when you can, and you also contribute by flagging when you need support and then receiving it.
And be open to receiving.
Right.
And be comfortable about receiving. I think it's very beautiful. I learned something from what you said, that relationships can be naturally regenerative. That's a very clear takeaway for us to reflect upon and to harness and work with. So now that you established Nabo, and I see that you were sensing a vacuum of community where people can be there for each other without having to invest years and years of something and knowing them. How did you take it off the ground? I understand what propelled you, but what shape and form has it taken since it was founded, and how did it get off the ground? And then, of course, you can tell us how has it been since it was founded?
So I'll be totally open about this, because it's very easy for me to tell like a euphemism story here, but I think enough people experience these same things. I think it's important for me to share. I went on stress leave for 6 months. Because once I started to notice how many people around me were suffering, I started to try to support them in this one-way, non-regenerative approach. I was giving and giving and giving without finding ways to receive, without looking for ways to bring energy back into myself. And I ended up on stress leave because my body was hurting so much from carrying all of that. And it was during that time that I really began to realize, like, whoa, Elisabeth, this isn't healthy to do this one-way approach. I need to be in a community where other people are giving back and I'm giving to them, and we agree to do that together. We build it together, right? And when I started to come back from stress leave, I was still at like the part-time level, gradually coming back in. I got laid off.
Right.
I got laid off. So, that is a terrible feeling. First of all. I was given garden leave for another 6 months. And I could not have imagined a more beautiful gift than 6 months to really reckon with what I learned during my stress leave and reimagine how I wanted to move forward.
Beautiful. And
So
these moments of disruption, I often say, are gifts, if you're ready to see it as such, because they are the impetus to take stock of where you are and where you truly want to go. It can be such an opportune moment for great shifts. And that's exactly what happened to you.
Right. So I had these insights during stress leave, and had I gone back to work and just gone straight back into the situation I was in, that would have been very different. But instead, I was forced to think about what I wanted to do next. And I had this sense of like, oh man, if I could only have this kind of community that's regenerative and where we're all building a sense of belonging together and taking care of each other. Well, why don't I try to build that? So that's where the idea had come from. If you've heard of Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, he's a strong role model of mine. And this idea of building a neighborhood with neighbors was a good inspiration. So during my garden leave, I was able to spend several months building this app that I built using a framework called the Design for Belonging framework. It was developed by Susie Wise at the Stanford D School. And it breaks down this idea of belonging into really concrete terms, where it trains you to look at the world from the perspective of a designer, identify key moments, the moments that are most important for developing a sense of belonging or a sense that you're being othered, and then apply a certain types of design levers in those moments to help magnify the belonging in them and decrease the othering. And so I decided to build this app as sort of a model where when people join in this space, they can actually experience what it feels like to be in a space that was built from the bottom to the top, with this design for belonging framework. There's basically nowhere else you're ever going to go that has been built from the floor to ceiling that way. And when people experience it, I think that's the most profound thing that you can do to help give that insight of like, these are design choices that we're making about how we handle when someone enters a room. And I can make that choice differently in lots of tiny ways in my everyday life. It gives you this sense of empowerment as a designer to make choices differently to increase a sense of belonging for yourself and everyone around you. So I built this app and in September opened it up for people to start joining as a pilot period. And for 6 months, we kept it kind of quiet, just let some people trickle in. It got to about a maximum of 100 people during that 6 months, and we could test some things. And then it was only at the beginning of, April, I think, that we started to talk more openly about it and invite more people in. And since then we've hit 400 now, and it's a really beautiful place to be. People are extremely kind and caring to each other, and that's unusual in social media.
And 400 is a handsome number for a novel attempt, and it's a new app and a new initiative. People are definitely recognizing it and are also find that it's resonating with them. What can people do with this platform? Just give us a lowdown of what to expect.
So inside the platform, there is, I think of it as an actual neighborhood. You have what I call the town square, which is a space where everybody in the app can talk to each other in a more public space. It has its own feed as well as its own events calendar, and people can share the events that they think others might be interested in a more general way. Events that are in particular that are inclusive. So maybe there's both English and Danish, or maybe it's in English or another language. And in that space, we have some community activities. Like on Wednesday, we have this Wednesday practice where you celebrate something. It can be really small, but it's a practice of remembering that there are so many things in your life that are worth celebrating that we often look right past, or we don't want to brag on ourselves or whatever. And then on Fridays, we have Friday fails, where we share things that have gone wrong or didn't go our way or that were really embarrassing. And that's also a practice of not performing perfection the way that we do everywhere else. This is a place where you can finally put that down. So that's like the big space. And along with that, there's a workshop library. So every webinar that we do, we record and put it in there. And that's everything from webinars about learning Danish to webinars about finances in Denmark, etc. But all of them with a focus on belonging. So then there's a resource library. There's more than 30 guides in there that help people to adjust to Denmark, and the tone that's used is friendly. Not only is it sort of streamlining all these resources from around the internet, it also is designed to feel as though you're getting this information from someone who really cares about you, like a friend sending you a WhatsApp message explaining to you how to visit the doctor's office in Denmark for the first time. So those are all the big public spaces, but then beyond that, there's a lot of subgroups. One of the things that I noticed quite clearly when I started to look at the existing communities in Denmark is that they're almost all divided by geography. Yeah. So there's, for example, like Billund Internationals and Friends on Facebook, and we love that group. It is pretty instrumental. It's about saying, I need a plumber, someone give me a contact information, but it's also geographically siloed. So if you happen to be in a place where you don't have access to a lot of that community, too bad for you, right? Yeah. And if let's say you're a Portuguese speaker in Billund and there are 4 other Portuguese speakers in Billund, wouldn't you want to connect to other Portuguese speakers all over Denmark? Yeah. Like, what are the characteristics on which you would want to be connecting? And so we made these subgroups based on a common language, a common ground, which is location. Yeah. Common interest. Yes. And then common identity. So for example, families or LGBTQ or various others. And when you enter those spaces, the idea is that you can get all the information and resources you need like that. Yeah. In the pinned posts, but also you're immediately finding your community of people that can answer your questions and help you get connected in all the ways that you need.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. Really so much to, facilitate and enable an expat or an international to find their footing and find a support network. I would highly recommend people who are looking for such a support network to also log on and try out Nabo. Yeah. But now you tell me, when we had an event in late May, and lo and behold, we were all really pleasantly surprised that so many people turned up. The reception was tremendous, both from Danes, also representing institutions, as well as a ton of internationals from all over the world. Clearly, this has struck a chord. This building belonging event has struck a chord and caught the imagination of the regular Joe out there. Just taking a few steps back, what in your view are the challenges or bottlenecks towards finding belonging? And now we're going to be very specific to Denmark. What is the problem, if any? Why is this even a topic today?
Yeah. Well, I think the first bottleneck is not specific to Denmark. And it is that a true solid sense of belonging has to begin inside of you. So all of these things that I mentioned about feeling seen and heard and accepted exactly as you are right now, how many of us can say that we do that to ourselves? That we accept ourselves exactly as we are right now, not who we wish we were or, hope to be next year or when we're employed or speak Danish fluently, right?
Yeah.
So the language that we hear around us that's transactional about when we will be valued and accepted, a lot of us have internalized. And we won't accept ourselves until then. But the secret is, once you get there, you probably still won't. You'll still think that you have more work to do before you'll be satisfied with yourself.
Very well said.
So if you have not done that work, then even when you have people around you who are saying, no, we love you as you are, it's a little bit like your mom, you're like, Mom, you have to say that. Right. You almost won't believe it. So I think one of the main bottlenecks is that one, that you also have to do this inside. I have to, and this was a big part of what I was doing during my stress leave.
Yes.
Was really focusing in on the difference between who I am and what I do. And the being doing distinction.
Yeah.
If I'm just sitting still, which is part of what you do on stress leave.
Yeah.
How is it that I'm living into my best life? How am I having a meaningful life if I'm just sitting here in a chair enjoying birdsong?
Yeah.
And shouldn't I have to earn it?
Yeah.
Shouldn't I have to earn a meaningful life? And the answer is no, because the moment you're born, the moment you take a first breath, you are worthy of love and care and acceptance and belonging, period. And I can't imagine anyone looking at a fresh newborn baby and saying, you got to earn it, kid. Like, I'm not going to love you until you earn it. Of course we don't believe that. Like, look at your baby self. You already belong.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest bottleneck, to be honest.
We ourselves and our own capability of accepting us the way we are.
Right. Because
not
that shame
any more accomplishment to that. Yeah.
Right. That shame and that fear get in the way so easily from really good, beautiful community relationships. Because if we're not willing to accept care from other people, because we see that as failure, we see that as being not enough, not good enough, not together enough, then you can't build the kind of community of belonging that we're trying to aim for. So that's the first thing.
Help me dumb it down for me further. Is it correct that unless and until I accept myself and we accept ourselves for who we are here and now, we are not capable of allowing the people around us to give us acceptance and to accept us?
I think that that's accurate. Yeah. And I think, it's not black and white. I think, for example, when you have someone that you've built kind of that intimate relationship with over a long time, you might sort of open the doors just a little bit to say, like, I know you well enough. I feel safe enough with you that in this moment I can admit my frailty and my vulnerability. I can recognize it and just say that it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I can allow you to care for me.
Right.
But again, there's this social barrier that we have that like, no, you can't acknowledge that until well into the relationship, right? And that safety takes so long to build.
Yes.
So we get these little like door openings where we can accept it.
Yeah.
But especially, I think if you are new to an area, and I don't necessarily just mean, you know, someone who has immigrated or moved from one country to another. It can also be any kind of move. You move to a new city or a new job. And if you don't have those spaces where you're opening those doors a little bit here and there, you're walking around your new job trying to, you know, I'm together and I am a professional and I know what I'm doing. But then you're not getting that stillness when you actually are able to stop and say, actually, I don't have it all together. And I don't know what I'm doing. And I feel like an imposter and this is scary. And I wish someone would give me a hug.
Yeah. So the ball is in your court to allow for someone else to give you belonging. That is yours.
I wouldn't put it that way. I would say that it is important for you to build a foundation of belonging within yourself in order to then accept that other people are seeing you and cherishing you for who you are.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's how I would put that. Yeah. And that's hard work.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons that when I have conversations with people, and this is also true, I don't know, on LinkedIn, the first thing that I want to do is cut through all this messaging that people are hearing so much of the day, that you're not enough, you need to do more. You will only be accepted. You will only integrate. You will only feel this when, whatever you fill that in with, you're getting that from everywhere. You get it in ads too. That's what ads are based on. You're not enough yet. You need to buy this. I want to break through that and look people in the eye before we have any other conversation and slow it down. Slow down those messages and let them know I see them. I see you. And I remember that you were a baby.
Yeah.
And I remember that you're worthy and precious right now. And maybe you don't, but maybe if you see a small reflection from at least one other person, maybe it will trigger that memory for you too.
Yeah.
Because we all did know it at some point when we were kids.
Sure. But now tell me, I understand what you're saying, and I understand that the impetus of belonging, much of it lies within ourselves and what we allow ourselves before we also allow the world around us to offer us that sense of belonging. Yeah. We are essentially aiming to co-create belonging. What can society, and let's say more specifically here in our context, Danish society, and society is composed of people like you and me and the Danes. What can society do to make it more inviting and comfortable and accepting of internationals for who they are? What is it that we need today to really create belonging for internationals in this country?
Well, I would say you can't create belonging for internationals if you're not thinking about belonging for all of us.
Yeah.
So every person has a need for belonging. Every person has a right to belonging. And if we are to belong as internationals, we need to belong to the same community as Danes. It has to be an us, not an us and them. So I'll speak in terms of people generally in Denmark. I think one thing I've noticed is that Danes actually, there's a value, a cultural value around belonging. It's just that we don't use that word. Instead, we use the word hygge.
Right.
When you ask someone about hygge, and maybe Danes will correct me here, but when you ask someone about hygge, a lot of the things they say are very similar to how I described belonging. You feel safe and comfortable. You feel that you're part of something and that you can be who you are. You don't have to have that tension of trying to be something you're not. So I think that cultural value is there. So is the deep value of good, beautiful design. And I think what we need to do is take those values, and they're so good at designing for hygge, right? The question is, who are they designing the hygge for?
Exactly.
Who's part of the sphere of hygge? And I think, when we talk about inclusion, what I hear when I hear the word inclusion, I know this is semantics, but that's okay. I'm just going to go with it. When I hear inclusion, what I hear is that there's something that exists and you're being invited into it. So you are being included in a thing that exists already, right? And there's a power imbalance when you talk about that, because someone else is already in it They're the haves, and then you have someone else who's a have-not, and it becomes the person who makes that invitation has the power because they can also reject.
Sure.
When I think about belonging, I'm thinking more about expanding your idea of who's in it in the first place because you've co-created it. It's ours because we both built it together. So in a way, I think there's some work to do on the idea of hygge and design and co-designing a kind of hygge that's for everyone. Where another thing I think of with hygge is these like kind of close spaces, like these nooks, right?
Yeah, it's cold, it's snowing outside,
Right.
you light a bunch of candles and feel cozy.
Right. So we need to find a way to think of hygge that's expansive while also keeping the hygge to wrap around us all. And this is where that metaphor that I used at the Belonging in Denmark event comes from, is this blanket of belonging. Right? If you think of a room that's enclosed, well, that's really hard to redesign. It's hard to move those walls. But if we're thinking in terms of a blanket, if we make a blanket that's big and flexible and strong, then it can wrap around all of us.
Yes.
Danes and internationals. Okay. And then you can extend that metaphor. And that's what we did together at this event, that when you weave a fabric of some kind, in this case, a blanket, you need diversity. You need the different strands to be going in different directions. It won't work if they're all in one direction. It'll just fall apart.
Yeah.
You also need this like up and down weaving where you take turns being on top and on bottom, sharing attention and resources and care. And then you also need this overall sense of design that keeps it moving in a way that has intention and an overall coherence and completeness, right?
Right.
So we all have to participate actively in weaving this thing together so that it can be ours and so that it can wrap around us all.
Yes. And thereby step away from the dynamic of somebody being in belonging in a space and then inviting someone else. And, just step away from that line of thought to a place where belonging is something that truly belongs to us. All spaces and avenues belongs to us and we co-create it. Right. I absolutely love the metaphor of the blanket of belonging and the way you put it. It's almost sublime. This conversation has been not just thought-provoking, but it's beautiful in so many ways because you also talk about how the values, cultural value of belonging exists. And the design to support it exists too. We just have to recognize the two and broaden the scope for it. I think that's really, really beautifully put. This is the kind of, warm, gooey, hopeful optimism that I hope the podcast does offer from time to time to our guests. Any other last final thoughts on your endeavor? And what is if you were to give a word of advice, a word of sympathy, or share any tidbits based on your experience of living as an international and now as a permanent resident here, what should a newbie starting on their international life anywhere in the world be mindful of?
Yeah. Maybe I would say I'll start by commenting on this idea that it's like this warm, gooey, soft, wonderful thing. So the way that I described Nabo is that it's a space where Danes and internationals are co-creating a fellesskab of belonging. Fellesskab is the Danish word for community.
Yeah.
That is hard, not just theoretically, but in very personal ways. Most people don't get to the point where they're able to accept themselves for who they are and then be able to give from that abundance unless they have suffered in a really profound way. It's hard to prioritize doing that work if you're comfortable. And because we live in a society that tells us you shouldn't do that work, you should become better and better and better, and then you'll get your reward. So I would say that when you're in a season of transition, which you are when you come to a new place, when you're in between jobs, right now that it is not soft. It is painful and it will test you in so many ways. It will question your identity, your worth. You'll forget who you are in some places. It is really existentially hard work to be in a season of transition. But what I'd also say is that these seasons of transitions in our lives are profound moments of beauty and possibility. And in a lot of cultures, you can see that seasons of transition are honored with ritual. So coming of age, marriage, birth, death, these are universally recognized as moments of suffering and also moments of beautiful possibility, transformation. And when you go through one of those seasons, simply trying to get out of it, network your way out of being between jobs as quickly as you can into a new one, or make as many friends and go to as many networking events as you can so you're not a newcomer anymore. You're not taking the time, this incredible moment of possibility to do that work of believing that you're worthy right now.
Yeah.
Those are the moments when you get to do it. Embrace that moment when you get to start building your own belonging. I would also say that because we live in a society more broadly that isn't safe for vulnerability, we've built those walls and shields for a reason. It can be pretty prickly on LinkedIn or other social media, right?
Yeah.
So you need to find places that are safe to be vulnerable and to do that hard work. And that's a big part of what Nabo is for.
Yeah.
So whether it's joining Nabo, whether it's finding other people or places, even like nature is a really good place for this. Go to a place that feels safe for you to be just who you are without those messages, and really try to embrace your season of transition as something beautiful that you can honor. And of course, we'll be waiting for you in Nabo to be a good neighbor and to be supportive of you through that. This is a group of people all doing the same thing. So, you're welcome and wanted in Nabo, but please, be gentle with yourself and honor that time for what it is.
This is absolutely spectacular, the way you put it, really, that this is not a kind of response one could have anticipated. And I think it's beautiful that you say that this is moving to a new place for someone who's just starting on their journey, recognize it as a season of transition. And instead of jumping in, to fill in that vacuum and that newness, sit in it, dwell in it, enjoy the space that you have and see that you are worthy and complete here and now before you also open up to create new connections.
Yeah.
And see this as a beautiful season of transition. I think you put it very poetically as well.
Yes. Can I leave you with a quick metaphor? I found this out, I think, on the Radiolab podcast. When a caterpillar goes into the chrysalis, the cocoon, and stays in there for a little while and then comes out as the butterfly, we all use this metaphor. It's so beautiful of transition and all of this. Do you know what happens when it's inside there?
Tell us.
It liquefies.
It becomes all jelly and gooey.
It's like this is gross, but it's like a snot-like consistency.
Yeah.
It completely liquefies and then rebuilds itself from its own DNA in a new form.
Incredible.
And one also absolutely mind-blowing thing is that it can actually retain memories.
Wow.
From one phase to the next.
Yes.
But I feel like it's a hilarious and just such an apt metaphor, even more apt than we ever knew, because that transition space is one of possibility and beauty, but it is messy, but you can't skip it. You can't skip it.
Exactly.
You might as well embrace that you are liquefying to rebuild.
Totally. And nature is astounding and full of pointers for us to take from and learn from. I could not have wished for a more scintillating, rewarding, thought-provoking and heartwarming conversation, Elisabeth. This has been truly rewarding for me to listen to you and your perspective, because any talk on belonging is very divisive. It always starts from the idea of us and them not seeing us in our entirety or not doing ABC. But if you change the whole point of departure and say, hey, it's something that we have to co-create, and then how, then we have a completely different problem and a completely different approach. And I think you have offered us a lot of good food for thought and an appeal to change our ways to understand and approach belonging. I wrap up this episode for my viewers. If you have enjoyed listening to Elisabeth, if she has sparked a bulb in you and some thoughts in you, if it has moved you in any way, you can do a couple of things to show support. A, drop a comment below on YouTube, and B, share it, and C, you should also try and subscribing to the channel so that you can be in the loop of wonderful discussions that I'm having with other migrants and expats and internationals, because we are always getting richer with each other's experiences. I take this moment to give you a great thanks, Elisabeth. Thank you for being with us today.
And thank you for having me, Surabhi.
Its pleasure is all mine and ours. To my audience, till such time that I come back again with another wonderful guest on the Decoding Diaspora podcast, please do take care of yourself, enjoy your seasons of transition, and try to fully accept yourself. Life is beautiful and there's just so much to embrace and look forward to. Do take care of yourself. Bye-bye.